Hello and welcome to the Art of Being Human. As we've been studying emotions and we're going into grief and depression next, I want to make some kind of conclusive remarks about emotions and what their importance is in our lives, because indeed they're very, very intense. They're very, very powerful. And I think the main thing you need to know about them is that we view our lives through them. If you're angry about something, you view your life through that anger. You view everything in terms of whatever you're experiencing in the moment. And so emotions are what you're experiencing in the moment. Now, the emotions are not the same as a disposition. It's not the same as your character. It does not define you in terms of who you are, but it defines you in terms of what you are experiencing in the moment. And that's what people see. People see your emotions. They don't see the true you. But when you are away from the emotions and you're calm and nothing's bothering you, then you people start to see you as you are. So let me go through some things on this chart. Emotions. They're intense and they're powerful, and we view our lives through them. If I'm angry about something, all I can think about is that anger and why I'm angry at who I'm angry at or the situation, and that's for the moment my state of being. So I think we can say that emotions are not only feelings, which they are of course, but they're also states of being, at least temporarily. Not your basic character and what your basic character is, but for the moment, your state of being, because you're living what you're feeling. People think of themselves as being so rational, but we're not as rational as we think. We live through what we are feeling, and that's what kind of defines us for the moment. So let's go on with this. The emotions are not our character or our disposition, but the state of being for the moment. And they have a physical base. If you try to get rid of emotions by thinking them away, usually it does not work. If you think of what your emotions are, they're always in tune with what's happening with you physically. There is a physical base to your emotions. And I'm thinking now maybe the best example for women is menopause. When women go through menopause, they have states of extreme anxiety, extreme depression. They can get dizzy, they can't think straight, even their vision changes, and they keep thinking, I shouldn't have these emotions, I shouldn't be depressed, I shouldn't be anxious, I should be able to think these things away. Why? Because they feel mental, and anything that feels mental, you think that you can take care of mentally. But the problem is our bodies and our emotions are based upon what's happening to us physically. In the case of menopause, women are losing their estrogen, losing their progesterone, and they have follicle-stimulating hormone bombarding them from the pituitary gland, trying to force their bodies to produce the estrogen that just isn't there. And that is what causes the symptoms of menopause. You have FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, and you're getting it from the pituitary gland, and it's flooding your system, and what it's trying to do is to make your ovaries secrete estrogen. But the estrogen is not there or is in limited supply, and so therefore it's the bombardment of the FSH that's causing all of the anxious symptoms and the depression and so forth. Now, it's a physical thing. You're feeling it mentally. You're feeling anxious. You're feeling nervous. You're feeling fear. You're feeling all kinds of things. However, it's because of what's happening in your balance, or the hormonal balance in the system, which is giving you those symptoms. And so you can't just think it away. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to have this emotion. I'm not going to have this emotion. I don't have to have it. I'm going to think it away. It's going to be gone. And then you find the more you dwell on it, the more you try to get rid of it, the stronger the emotion becomes. It's almost easier to get rid of it by not thinking about it and distracting yourself and doing something else than it is to think about it and try to think in terms of getting it to go away, because it won't work that way. And it's the same for the other symptoms. Now, menopause is a good example of that because it's a stage of life that every woman goes through. And some people have a very bad time with it. They have a lot of other symptoms too. They get dizzy. There's tons of things that they do. They can't think straight. You know, they're not clear-headed, and they always know when that kind of symptom is going on that it's part of the menopause. But you know, people can experience menopausal symptoms and not realize that's what it is. They can go to a doctor and say, suddenly I don't feel good, I'm nervous, I'm irritated, and angry. You get to different moods in menopause. I'm angry and I never used to be angry before. And you can experience all kinds of things and think, my goodness, what's wrong with me? I must have a mental problem. As a counselor, and I was board certified for a long time, I've dropped it now that I'm retired, but as a nationally board certified counselor, I used to get a lot of women coming in to me and saying, well, you know, I feel awful, I used to feel good. I don't feel happy anymore. I'm angry a lot. I have mood changes. I'm nervous. I'm distractible. I'm depressed. You know, I don't even see right. I don't even think clearly. What's going on? I must be having a nervous breakdown. And to all of those women who came in, I asked one simple question: how old are you? And they would say, well, I'm 40, I'm 50. But even as early as 35, you can start getting symptoms. You can get perimenopausal symptoms early. And of course, if you have hormonal difficulty anyway, then those symptoms can come on at any age. But for most women who are healthy, those symptoms are going to come on in midlife. Let's say, I hate to think of 40 as midlife. With the age range that people live today, it's more common to think of 50 as midlife. But it depends upon the person. It depends upon their physical nature, how healthy they are, what's going on in their bodies. So when I ask them the question, how old are you, then I'm just trying to narrow down an age range for which these symptoms would start to appear. And when they start to appear at that age, I say, is there a possibility that you might be starting menopause? Because those are the symptoms of the hormonal disorder that occurs at menopause. And they stop to think, well, maybe, but they hate to think of that because they think, well, they're older. Now, some people don't have a problem at all with it. They just sail right through it and it's not difficult. Some people just have hot flashes, which can be terrible and awful, but as far as the emotions, the depression and the anxiety, they don't necessarily have it. But some people have the hot flashes, some people have chills, some people have hot flashes and chills at the same time. And it always feels mental to them, because how do you feel your emotions? You feel your emotions from your mind. Your mind is thinking. Your mind is thinking about the things that you're feeling. And so it seems like mental symptoms, but it really has a physical base. If you are having a certain illnesses, and I mentioned autism last week, but there are all kinds of illnesses or physical conditions. It can change the way you perceive things, it can change the way you feel about things, and it feels mental and it's not, because it has a physical base. And when you treat the symptoms or you treat the initial illness, whatever it is, then those symptoms go away. So the key to absolving some of these symptoms is to take care of whatever physically may be wrong with you. And I always had a rule when I started seeing people in my office, say for the first time when they were just starting counseling, I would say, you need to go to a doctor, you need to get a physical exam, you need to make sure that there's nothing physically wrong with you before you decide that you're an emotional wreck. Now, you could still be an emotional wreck and have something physically wrong with you, but a lot of times one is a precursor to the other. And so it's just important that you take care of all details. You don't want to leave anything unturned. You don't want to leave any stone unturned. And find out what's actually going on in your system and see if that's causing the emotional distress that you feel. You still may need counseling. You still may need therapy. But if you have a physical basis, then you need to have that taken care of. And a lot of our thinking, especially for people who are psychotics, now people who are neurotic, they're fully functioning people, but they have anxiety, depression, and other symptoms. Psychosis is a bit different, where their thinking is abnormal. They don't think normally. I mean, I've seen people who thought they were dead. I'm dead. That's what's wrong with me. And I would say, well, if you're dead, how can you be talking to me now? Breathing, talking, living. Well, I'm not living, I'm dead. My problem is I'm dead. And the thing is, you can never talk a person out of a state like that. You have to work around it in other ways. If you argue with a person, you're not dead, you're not half dead. I mean, I saw a person who thought that the top half of their body was alive and the bottom half of their body was dead. And I said, you wouldn't be able to live if the top part of your body was dead. Or the top part of your body was alive and everything else was dead. You wouldn't be able to live because you can't have half a dead body and the other half be alive. But say the problem is a physical problem like psychosis. Psychosis is caused usually by a problem in the brain. The biochemistry of the brain is not normal. It's not right. And when you get the biochemistry of the brain off, all of the thinking that goes along with that is also off. And so you're thinking not right, but it's because your system is not right. And you can't, by the power of your mind, force that to change. You can't say, okay, I'm never going to be psychotic. I'm never going to have a hallucination. I'm never going to have a delusion. Not that the people would know what they were, but they could describe what they're feeling. You know, I talked with a woman who had, or she thought she had, a demon or several demons in the wall taking pictures of her. She was afraid to take a shower because they'd be watching her. I says, where are these people? I was in her apartment. I don't see anybody here except you and me. Well, they're in the wall. And right now they're taking pictures of you. And I said, do you realize that the wall is this thick? I mean, it's not a thick wall. How is anybody going to fit in a wall with a camera to take a picture of you? Well, they're there. I can see them. And you see, the problem is you can't argue a person out of it. That's what they think. That's what they believe. And as a result of that, their emotions are running amok. They are thinking, oh my gosh, I'm being watched. I'm frightened. I don't want to be here. I'm afraid that something's going to happen to me because there's somebody watching me. And that same person said, there's a person 5 stories up in another apartment taking pictures of you now. I says, how would they even see us? They're 5 stories up, you know? There are floors between these apartments. And she said, well, that's the way it is, you know, that's the way they do it. Who's they? So you can talk to them till you're blue in the face, and you're not going to get them to change their feelings. You may want to do it, though, because you may want them to face reality. If you can get them to face reality, that may change their emotions of the moment. But it generally doesn't last. If a person is ill enough that we can consider them to be psychotic, that they see things that aren't there, and no, at least nobody else is seeing them, they hear things that nobody else hears, then you can be sure that they're going to need to have some therapy, some really psychodynamic therapy from somebody who's very skilled at doing it. But in addition to that, they're going to have medication. And what the medication will do will change the way that their hormone balance is. In menopause, you would be taking artificial estrogen or something to get the hormones in balance. And then the anxiety and the depression and the dizziness and the moods and the anger and all the stuff that goes on with them would stop. It would level itself out. The symptoms would disappear. You wouldn't be able to get rid of the symptoms by thinking about the symptoms, but you would be able to lessen the symptoms, keep them in control, just by taking care of what's physically wrong with them. On the other hand, when it comes to psychosis, you usually need more than medication. You also need to be able to have therapy. You need to have a combination of both therapy and medication. Now, when I was doing my counseling, I was in conjunction with a person who I deeply respected, who is a psychiatrist, and I would send people to him for a psychiatric evaluation medication if I thought something was going on psychiatrically with them that needed to have a medication management. So he would give the medication, I would do the therapy, and then I would be in touch with him every so often, and he would also see the client or the patient every so often, and we would manage the patient together. And then as a result of that, they would get well. Now, if there's something wrong with the way the biochemistry is in the brain, then that is going to stay with them. Schizophrenia doesn't leave. Paranoia doesn't leave. However, it can be managed. It can be managed with a combination of therapy and medication. And when you get the best of both worlds, the best of the counseling approach and the best of medication, then you can greatly alleviate the symptoms and the person can live a normal life. But they will have to be medically managed, maybe for the rest of their lives. It's something that just doesn't leave easily, and it doesn't leave on its own. There has to be a continual kind of medical and counseling management for them. And that's really the best kind of therapy there is. And of course, there are other things, getting involved in activities, having normal relationships with people. And it's important that a person have as normal a life as possible. When it comes to psychosis, then that management usually has to continue. In the case of menopause, sometimes the body will adjust enough so that at some point they won't need the medication that they have, and the mental symptoms will go away kind of on their own, usually with some counseling help, but on their own as much as they can. When a woman gets older, in her 60s and in her 70s, she usually doesn't need to have medication anymore for the menopause, although she still may have some symptoms occasionally. She still may have hot flashes and so forth. My mother had hot flashes when she was 91. She complained of hot flashes, and the doctor gave her some estrogen every so often to manage that. It never left her. But on the other hand, most women, they find, and this won't happen with psychosis, of course, but most women will get better and better as time goes on. And you know, I learned something interesting, and I'll probably close with this because we're kind of getting to the end of our time. But I was learning, I've been studying PTSD. I've done some work with you here on PTSD and what it is and what the symptoms are. What I didn't realize is that when people have those awful symptoms of PTSD, the fear, not being able to sleep, being afraid of everything, they hear a noise, they jump, they think it's somebody shooting them with a gun and all of that, that actually causes a brain injury. We usually don't think of it that way, but when a person has been to war, they've seen too much, they've done too much, they feel awful, they come back, they have all kinds of mental symptoms. I know my sister was in her house once. I was talking with her over the phone. I was in Tennessee at the time, and she was in Maine, and all of a sudden she started yelling, somebody's trying to break in, someone's trying to break in. We have to get off the phone. I have to call the police. And I said, call the police and then call me back. It was someone who had PTSD, who suddenly thought they were back in the Vietnam War, trying to bang into her house because they thought she was a Viet Cong. If they'd ever gotten in, I don't know what would have happened to her. But these mental symptoms, PTSD symptoms that come from all of the warfare that a person has experienced, that actually can cause a brain injury. Thinking about what you've done, thinking about the killing of innocent people, thinking about the fact that you yourself are still alive, but some of your best buddies are dead, and you don't understand it, and you have the remorse that survivors have sometimes. And it can actually cause, all that mental pressure actually causes a change in the brain and causes a change in the way the brain functions. And when that happens, you have a brain injury. And it is healable. It is healable. You have to have special treatment, as if you were a brain-injured person, because you are a brain-injured person. It is not natural for people to go to war, kill innocent people, even if they don't want to, find themselves alive when their best buddy, maybe standing right beside them, has died because of a gunshot wound, and the person, you yourself, are still alive. It's just not a natural thing. It does have effects upon the brain. The brain can be injured. I think it's possible, if you have all kinds of emotional trauma in your life and you have PTSD for other reasons than warfare, you've been abused, you had a bad marriage, all kinds of strange things happen to you, that can actually cause your brain to change. And it's as if your brain has been injured and you need to be treated for that. So don't think that emotions, that you can just get rid of them because you can think them away. They have too much of a physical base for that. And you need to find out if there is anything going on within you physically and that would cause your distress. And if not, then you handle it in a therapeutic manner. Well, I'm going to close now because it's too late for me to get into anything else. We'll run out of time, and we're going to go into grief and depression, and that next time we'll start that. So I'm glad that you watched. We'll see you next time.